Hey, Andy, how's it
Hey,
going?
living the dream. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Thanks for joining us on Fuse calls. So, you started out as a graphic designer, but you've said that you always had a propensity to do art and design, even as far back as high school. Can you give some background on what you were like in high school?
Yikes. Okay. High school, sure.
In Jersey, right?
In Jersey, yeah. So I served time in an all boys prep school, which is I'm looking at your face, and what you're imagining is pretty much what it was, like shirt, tie, blazer, the whole
I,
fun.
I went to parochial school myself, so
Fair enough. All right,
yeah,
common thread. Very
there
good.
you go.
But it was interesting. Like I guess a lot of kids, like I feel like I didn't really fit in. Like I wasn't particularly athletic. I mean, even now I run when chased. I'm a short guy, had a bad case of gravity, and like it was just kind of awkward, as I guess most high school kids are. I also had like significant learning challenges, so it was just like a really interesting time for me. But like three kind of good things happened. Like one, they had a theater program, which was really cool. And there were like five sister schools. So I'm like, they would bus in the girls for rehearsal. And I was like, you mean they come to us? I was like, yeah, sign me up. But also like I'm a pretty significant introvert. So, doing theater was a good way for me to kind of get out of that shell a little bit and, fear test and get a little bit more comfortable with other people, which is, really good. Um, Another thing I discovered too was like sketch notation and mind mapping. And like I was always just an awful menace, horrible student. And like when I discovered that, a lot of things made more sense. Like English class, all of a sudden, like, oh, I get Shakespeare now. Like, it's just kind of really good. And the other
So
cool,
you would mind map in high school. You basically like I don't get Shakespeare, so I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna mind map
oh, okay,
Shakespeare.
okay.
Is kind of what you
Yeah,
meant?
let me backtrack a little bit. So, a lot of the designers like mind mapping is a technique where you'll start with the idea in the center of the page, and you'll kind of branch off how
Yeah.
things connect and how ideas are. So you have kind of like a wide lens view of the entire thing that's going on, and like it makes complicated things a little bit more sense. Like we do a lot at work as well, just to track ideas too. And the sketch notation was really good because like most designers, like we're not linear thinkers. Having to listen to things is just cruel and unusual for us. But like the sketch notation of being able to like draw the concept of the idea of what's going on and connect that to each other and get that flow is like really good. If you allow me to like yada yada the science behind it, when you start drawing, it activates a different part of your brain, so you remember things in a different way, and that was something that actually really worked for me. So it was like the last 2 years of like high school, I actually became a much better student. So it's cool. Like those two things were really good. Did that answer your question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I've got a whole list of other questions
Oh,
for
okay.
that, but keep going. So you
Yeah.
would mind map Shakespeare, and you just intuitively did this in high school. I mean,
I, I wasn't very good, so I had nowhere to go but up. And I remember there was like this like news thing that they would like a TV. Actually, Anderson Cooper, the guy from CNN.
yeah.
So he was actually like a broadcaster like 20 years ago and did this like high school public broadcasting that was cool. And they did a segment on mind mapping and sketch notation. I was like, all right, I'll try it. I love to draw. I love to, and it made complex stuff really simpler for me to understand. So it was like super cool. And I was like, yeah, I'm totally doing this now. And it's something that I took with me throughout my career. Like I show you all those notebooks over there. Those are most of my like work notebooks on that
Wow.
show. They're just full of just all of the stuff that's going on. So
No, I have to say, nobody taught me anything about whiteboarding, which is it's
yeah,
similar.
sure.
And once I discovered whiteboarding, which is same type of thing, just sketch
Yeah.
that. Once it like changed my career altogether. They would call
Yeah.
me whiteboard man.
Oh,
My
awesome.
job,
Cool.
but yeah, yeah. So interesting, interesting.
Yeah, it was a good thing that happened there too. And also like something else in the this particular high school, like they had a magazine and they had a newspaper and they had a yearbook, and these were I was like, oh, I'm kind of interested in this. I'm like 16 years old doing like layout and paste up. So it's just kind of the start of really interesting aspects of design in my career.
So one of the things we're doing with Fuse this year is we are going to integrate some activities with local high schools,
Oh,
and
awesome.
we want to leave behind some artifacts, maybe some design even, or we just want to leave something behind for these young kids. So, you know, when I was doing some research on you, and you were talking about your high school experience, you know, and now when you're talking about, you were actually kind of challenged as a student.
Yeah.
Can you speak about how you went from doing, you know, kind of doing these design spreads in your room, or doing mind mapping Shakespeare so that you could get by, and kind of walk through the journey to where, you know, how did that get you to working on at GE, a $42 billion
Okay.
corporation, and working on their brand? I mean, I would think some of these high school kids, you know, how in the world does that happen?
Okay, that's a very good question, and I think when you frame it that way, it makes my life seem a lot more glamorous than it actually is. But thank you. Okay, so I think intrinsic in a lot of creatives is a strong fear of failure. Like, and I remember I was a student. I was really lucky to be a student of Milton Glaser, and you know, he talked about that fear of failure as a driving force. And you know, it's where people they don't want to go back to where they were. They want to get better. And that was something that was kind of always instilled in me, is like, you know, I want to be better than where I was or who I was yesterday. And to be able to grow as an individual, you find strategies that help you achieve that. You know, if there's an individual who's really gifted at sports, you know, that's something becomes a driving force for them, and they pursue that as a way to get to the next level, whatever that is. Or someone who's really good at writing, and they end up incorporating that into their day-to-day. It's discovering things about yourself, and being self-aware, and the things that make you happy, and the things that can drive you as a human being. Is that a fair answer? Does that make sense?
That makes sense
as a high level.
At high level.
Okay.
But as far, so you mentioned you studied under Milton Glaser. So you were this high school kid. Did you go to, where did you go to college?
Sure. So from high school, I was really interested in like theater and art. I wasn't the great student, as I mentioned before, but art school was a viable option. So Rutgers University has an art program, and I got accepted there, which is really great, you know, portfolio and kind of do that. And it was really interesting is at Rutgers, you know, like most art schools, like you have the work on the wall.
Yeah.
And the stuff that's there. And the marketing department for the university was on the first floor. And marketing department came up to me and said like, hey, would you be interested in doing theater posters for the theater department and music course? And it was like, sounds like an amazing opportunity. I'm like, I get paid for this? And they're like, yeah, you know, we have budget, we pay for this. Fantastic. I was like, yes, absolutely. Sure, absolutely. And like, then I went back to my desk and I was like, oh, okay, now I have to figure out what a contract looks like and what things go on an invoice. And, you know, just pro tip for any of the high school students there, you know, if an interesting opportunity comes up, just say yes and figure it out later, you know. And like most things as well, like good work begets good work, you know. So I think I was 18 in college. I started my design agency, for lack of a better term, and continued to do really good work, and continued to do that after I graduated. And it became a source of income. And it became a really interesting way for me to continue to grow. And, you know, from that, you know, I ran an agency for many years. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of my career between high school and GE. So running my agency, you know, I ended up doing really well. I was pretty good at my job, and, you know, drove success for a wide variety of companies and products. Good work begat more good work, begat, you know, better clients, and, you know, work with startups to Fortune 200 companies. It was really amazing. Like, you know, could do some light Googling. CNBC did a show on me and profiled some of the brand work I did. It's cool. You actually see me with more hair, which is nice. But one of the cool things too is like Bloomberg was a client of mine. And, you know, working with Bloomberg, working for this amazing global organization, you know, I was able to use design to affect change on an unprecedented scale. You know, it's fantastic. And like, as I was doing that work, you know, I realized something in me. I was like, you know, I want to do more stuff like this. Like, I want to be able to, like, you know, use my design skills for the forces of good and, you know, do some pretty amazing work. And as that was going on, I was keep my eye out on brands or companies that are doing interesting things. And then the GE opportunity came up, and I blindly applied on the website. I didn't have any connections, didn't know anybody there. I applied on the website, and I ended up working for a pretty amazing brand.
Wow, that's really impressive. So I'm going to, after I do these interviews, I'll publish a piece. I'll send it out to you. But I'm going to reference your websites and where people can view your work. So
yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so people can kind of see what it is you're describing and talking about. I know you've spoken about behavioral psychology before, behind doing what you enjoy and allowing that to drive you. I mean, you're kind of talking about that now. What is it you do outside of work that drives you?
Okay, let me clarify how you frame that question. I don't think behavioral psychology is a driver. It's definitely an accelerator. Okay. Whatever it is you're doing, it'll just make it easier. And that's been a kind of a backbone of how I work as a creative leader, is like understanding the how and why of people doing things. And, as a designer, as you're creating for audiences, it's important for you to know that anyway. But it's definitely an accelerator, and it's been something that's helped me out a lot. The thing that drives me is, the happiness that I get from creating things, whether it's, a logo, an app, or website. I really enjoy the ability to create things. That's my non-negotiable, like, throughout life, just to do that. And whether it's like cooking or furniture making or whatever, like, it's just something that, makes me happy and I enjoy it. Also, it has the added bonus of being able to be a great way to make a living. And just like Bob Baxley, who's this really impressive thought leader, and he talks about a lot of like design in relation to high school. And when you talk about the starting salaries of just entry level designers, like, it's amazing. Just for people just starting out in the careers of can have a very good quality of life. So it's good stuff. Now as I'm in the phase I am in life, one of the things I enjoy creating is just more leaders, not just creative leaders, but like better creative leaders, even at the Fuse conference, which I'll be at shortly, I'm teaching a masterclass on creative leadership, just because I think it's an important skill set that needs to get developed for our community.
How did you, you're not the first person I've spoken to who at this level has a focus on leadership. And Stephen Gates, this reminds me of Stephen Gates. He's talking about, as a designer, you hit a certain level where you're excellent at what you do. You could do a layout, you could do a graphic, you could do, a prototype, whatever. You've done it for so long, and you can rock it. But when it comes to leading people or managing people, it's an entirely different skill set that you have to learn. What do you think fundamentally is the difference there? Making that jump from, here I am good at my craft, but now I want to manage people and then maybe perhaps lead people. Okay.
Well, there has to be the want. Like, there's a lot of people who get elevated who may not be good leaders. And I hear that all the time. So there has to be the desire to do that.
And it's really good when people know that they don't want that. Some folks, I think they want it, but they really don't.
I think being self-aware of what you want and what you don't want and what you're capable and not capable, I mean, that's fine. Even understanding where you are in your career trajectory. Like, when I was, when me and my wife were pregnant with our first kid, like, one of the things was, we had an opportunity to accelerate our career pathing, but it was like, all right, if we do that, then like the time we spend with our kids gets diminished. Like, you make those calls, and
right.
All the time. And even the book Radical Candor, Kim Scott talks about that too, is like the right time for when you want to take those leadership jumps. Focus the question. How can I help you with that?
So, all right. I mean, I can even make this personal, because at my position, I've become somewhat of a business leader, but it's at a certain level. I'm not at a C-suite point. Okay. I don't know if, it would be very unusual for a design professional to make it to the C-suite at my company. So that's a good example. So if I was to say, it's not that I have my eyes set on a C-suite position. That's not really what I'm about. But if somebody in my position were to say, okay, I'm a design manager, but now I really want to kind of up my game and get a seat at the table, the leadership table, and help, say, a CEO make strategic decisions.
Okay.
Or I want to shape other people. And how do I do that? I can manage people, we can get things done, but how do I help to shape somebody's trajectory?
Okay.
Is that too loaded?
Well, there's a lot to unpack, but that's okay. That's okay. We're good. We got time. I heard two specific questions. How can you, where you are in the org, talk to leadership about the value of what you're doing and how to climb up that ladder to a degree? And the second question I heard was, how do I start molding and guiding, leading people? Is that correct?
Yeah, I would assume it's kind of interconnected.
Okay.
But maybe that's...
I see them as different things, but okay. No, I'll roll with this. Okay, so if you're in a managerial position and you want to elevate, and it sounds like the roadblock is the executive level or convincing them of that, there's a couple things you could do. It's always helpful when you're in an organization that values design. You know, I was very lucky at GE, like the vice chair, Beth Comstock, who was like the second lieutenant of the whole company. Like, she's a huge patron of design. Like, through that entire family tree, like, everyone understands the value of design and how it could drive global businesses forward. If you're working at Apple or Nike, of all those other brands that everybody loves, like, that's understood.
Yeah.
But when I give talks to people who are like, you know, management really doesn't understand what I do, and design is a stop in the pretty factory before it goes out the door, like, that's a challenge. So it's like understanding the dynamic of what you have to do. I'll make the assumption that in your particular situation, they understand the value of it?
I would say there's more recently, there's an effort to understand it than in the past, for sure.
Well, that's good.
So there's a kind of a start there. Yeah.
Okay. So something you can try and do, this is super practical and tactical. And one of the things that I did a lot at GE whenever I was talking to an executive leader is, like, this is where empathy and active listening come into play. Is like, you really need to understand the leadership that you're working with. Like, what's important to them, who they are as people, like, what are their goals, what are their business drivers, like, what are their personal objectives they're trying to do. Is like, you have to be really understanding of that, much as the same way like a designer would design for like a product for an individual. Like, you really need to understand the people and what their goals are. And this is where, like, the business understanding comes into play, where you need to really comprehend how design fits into their ecosystem. And then how brand or strategy or design can help them achieve that. And, like, you know, don't BS, like, it needs to be real. But, you know, if you can make that connection, if you can connect the dots for them about how this is a business, how design is a business driver, how design is an accelerator, how brand can strategically help them achieve whatever the hell they want to do, you know, it brings you closer to that, you know, proverbial seat at the table. Is that helpful as, like, just a very simple strategy?
No, that's great. Do you have, because I've heard this kind of idea before. I think an example might really hit home. Is there any examples of that you can think of in your experience where, okay, you had kind of a C-suite team or individual who wasn't really appreciative of the value of design, and you had a strong design leader coming in, maybe it was you, a strong design leader came in and kind of converted that leader, or persuaded? Because it's like, what I see is you have businesses that really value design, and then other businesses that, you know, it's just not part of the culture.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll attempt to answer that question. And
this is an improv. Yeah, it's an improv question, but
first out the gate, like, there's no silver bullet. There's no golden snitch. There's no, like, one way that this makes everything happen. If you're working with an individual who doesn't get the value, or there are challenges with it too, something that has been helpful for me is understanding that every one of these individuals you're working with manages a P&L. Like, they manage a ledger that has all the itemizes of the business making money. And if you can quantify the metrics of how design can influence those things, and like really like specific, not vanity metrics, but real like concrete ways that it will affect change, makes your job a whole lot easier.
Yeah, I've done that myself. I mean, frankly, it's what separated me from all the other designers I've worked with at
Good for you.
this organization.
Cool.
I wouldn't say I'm brilliant at it, but it's like, what is it, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, I guess.
Sure. Sure. I gotcha.
All right, cool. Sorry.
The second question was about managing or helping grow leaders.
Yeah, well, I think there's a real distinction there between being a manager and, say, being a leader. Because I think when you're being a manager, you're kind of focused on tactics or results. Being a leader, you're more focused on people. Maybe I've answered my own question there, but being a leader, you're more about developing the people you're talking with. Would you say that's...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's your answer. So, I mean, for you, I think that'll work, and I think there's a lot of goodness in that too. As you talk managing people and leading, there's a certain aspect of inspiring. There's a certain aspect of helping people along, and there's also an aspect of I think some of the best leaders they don't give you the direction; they help you get there on your own, which is what just happened a minute ago. So
yeah.
Good for you.
Is it good for me or is it good for you?
I just work here. I just picked up the WebEx, so I'm just talking to y'all. But if you glean some insight from talking to me, that's my job here is done. Thank you very much.
No, it'd be great if I could get a certificate after this discussion. That'd be great.
Yeah, no.
So moving on to more questions. So the Fuse tagline this year is design, brand, and the business, the new unity. Yeah. And it was inspired by the old Bauhaus tag of art and technology, a new unity. So we're bringing a correlation there to the old Bauhaus, since we're celebrating the 100th anniversary. With regards to this new tag, brand and the business, can you talk about how you've managed successful dialogue with executives? Because you've clearly had dialogue with business executives, and once you're having those relationships, what is that like, having to kind of maintain and manage?
Well, I think at that level you're not managing the relationship. It's more of a simpatico partnership. But when you talk about the executives, just to reiterate a point I made earlier, everything gets tied to the business. It's like, how does this help the business on a more global level? Most of the executives you'll be working with, they're trying to solve honest to goodness business problems. They don't have time for the cosmetic ones. So it's just whether it's elevating stock price, or there's a challenge in one of the business units, or an entire unit's underperforming, those are big things that they got to deal with, and how does design help them do that? So
it's really, and I get this too, when you're at that level, you're really bringing your A game, and an executive really wants you to step in and be able to just jump in and be there and show up. Yeah, I mean, that's expected of you at that level. Even more so. Your job is to elevate the culture. And if you're like a VP of brand, or a head of global design or something like that, that whole function is representative of you. So that's kind of where you are at that level. Yeah. No, that's really good to hear. Okay. So next, how do you see today's design challenges in comparison to the Bauhaus from 100 years ago? So we were talking about, graphic design was arguably invented by, in that era. It was like industrialized communication, machines doing type and mass producing stuff. And this was kind of the mentality of the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus was, designing for industry. Today, I would argue we're kind of inundated with all of that stuff, all these objects from the past 100 years.
Right.
and designers are facing different challenges. And what would you agree? And if so, what would you say those challenges are?
Okay, well, I might respectfully push back about the origins of design, but that's irrelevant to the question. I think that the challenges that they would face are similar to today. I mean, there was a lot going on culturally at the time, and art has always been a representation of the culture, and in that, design is a service of function. And I think today's designers, like back then, in the Bauhaus, you had a multidiscipline approach to design. You weren't just a painter. You did many things. You did posters, you did layout, you did industrial design, you did a lot of things. And much like how today's designers are expected to understand customer experience and UX and coding, and as well as all of the other things go there. And I think building on that too, the challenges that the designers are going to face is now that design is getting that seat at the table, and they're working more with business leaders and affecting change in probably one of the more complicated eras in the history of the time. They're expected to do more. And they're also expected to understand business. They're also expected to understand negotiation and influence and a lot of these, these business school strategies in order to be more effective. And some of the designers who are doing really amazing work now, like, they get that and they understand that. And they could also have the added bonus of being able to galvanize teams and inspire cultures and do pretty great things.
Do you think the designer of today is more of is designing enterprise more than in the past?
I think enterprise is better positioned to affect change. When you think about the enterprises that are coming up, the new businesses, the ventures, and it's just people are, taking advantage of new opportunities and discovering new strategies for success. I think there's a lot going on.
There's a ton going on. That's for sure. Well, that's pretty much all the questions I have for you, Andy. Do you have anything you'd like to kind of say in summary for us?
I have like 1,002 questions for you, man. I'm really excited for the Fuse conference this year. What are you looking forward to? What's the value that you expect people to walk away with? I mean, it's going to be a great conference. You have kind of like some of the best designers on the planet all under one roof. So I'm super excited. What's your perspective, man?
I'm absolutely thrilled. I mean, this is the most I've ever been involved with Fuse. This podcast we're doing, this is my second interview, so hopefully I'll get a little bit better. And thanks for your time.
You're going out, man.
But
of course,
all of these. I mean, just for me, what really excites me, I really geek out on having these kinds of discussions with folks like yourselves. So that's my selfish excitement about it. But yeah, I'll be there in Chicago. I think working with Julie, she's been fantastic. So
yeah, she's awesome.
She's really helping to reshape Fuse this year. To your point, it's a completely different speaking faculty. I mean, we're kind of rebuilding it. We're definitely in a rebuilding year. There's a lot more focus on speaking at the enterprise level. We're talking, what I'm seeing is it's more about digital. We're the Facebooks and Googles and IBMs, and less about CPGs, because Fuse used to be about package design. And so I'm seeing a transition there with this conference. So, and then again, me selfishly, I'm really trying to push with Julie that we, extend what Fuse is beyond the 3-day event. So the event's going to be fantastic. We'll have a blast there. But I'm really trying to kind of push a content side to Fuse that really hasn't been present before. That's what this is about. So
yeah, well, I think that's good, and having those content pieces, I think are really great. And I think I being a total fanboy of conferences, I appreciate those things. So I think that's really good. Was from our chat today, was there anything that particularly stood out that you found value in?
Well, it never ceases to amaze me how kind of down to earth these business leaders I talk to are. So, again, like if I try to think back when I was like a high school kid, because this is one of the themes we're aiming at. I am the rock star that I once was kind of intimidated to be. And even today, I have so much more to learn, so much more to achieve. But I think, back then I was just thinking kind of clueless. I had no idea how this worked. Or, you're talking a little bit about being that oddball in school. I mean, I totally related to that. And I think really kind of sending that message to the next generation of, you might be the weirdo in your class, but guess what? If you're finding that you're, mind mapping, or you're approaching problems differently than everybody else in the class, and you want to understand the meaning behind it or something, because this was my thing. I felt school was kind of alienating. I wanted to know, why are we doing this? And eventually that caught up with me. I found a career being a creative. So I think that's really what resonates with me. Is sometimes I get very grandiose and I think, oh, there's all these folks out here and there's big names, Coca-Cola and Facebook and Target. But at the end of the day, these are all people just like me, So I think that's really what resonates with me.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, I'm happy to add to that. Was there anything that I made more complicated?
No, that's nothing comes to mind. Did you make more complex? I felt like some of my questions may have been a little complex, but I tend to improv a bit too. I think that's important. And sometimes I've been told I can be a bit verbose, but that's okay.
Yeah, I thought you were fine, and when focused, I thought it was even better. So I think you're a pretty good interviewer, and I appreciate the time. And I thought the questions were really thoughtful, actually, and it's gave me some stuff to think about. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andy.